Back on the record in the matters of the people of the state of Michigan versus Maddox, Burden, Fastenello, Haggard, Henry, and Lundgren. The prosecution can call their next witness.
Thank you. At this time, the people will call Ms. Terry Lynn Land.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury? Thank you. You can have a seat. You don't need that fan on? Nope, you're good. You can hear better, I'm sure.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. Okay. Please state your name, first and last, and spell both.
Terry, T-E-R-I, Lynn, L-Y-N-N, Land, L-A-N-D.
Okay, so I have a court reporter that's behind you, and there's a microphone in front of you. My court reporter has to take down everything being stated today, so I need your responses to be loud and clear, okay?
Sure.
And then they should be verbal responses. Head nods and head shakes would not be sufficient. We'd have to ask you if that's a yes or no. And then lastly, there are about 6 attorneys, and including the AGs on this case, or not including the AGs in this case. So if there's an objection, you would need to hold your response. I'll make a ruling and allow each attorney to give their response, okay? Before I tell you if you can give that answer or not, okay?
Yes.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. 2020. Did you hold any positions within the Michigan Republican Party?
I was the Republican District Chairman.
And how long have you held that position?
Well, it's the end of my 2-year term.
And prior to that position, did you have any other positions that you held within the Republican Party?
In the past?
Yes, prior to being the chairman.
Yes.
District chairman.
Yes, I served on the state committee and I've been a local county party chair.
And just because we know, have you held any political offices in the state of Michigan?
I've had elected office. I'm on the Wayne State Board of Governors and I'm former Secretary of State and I'm former Kent County Clerk Treasurer.
Now, in 2020, during the summer, did the Michigan Republican Party have its delegation in some form?
Yes.
Okay. And were you nominated for any positions at that delegation?
Yes, I was nominated to represent Republicans as an elector.
And what does it mean to be nominated as an elector for the Republican Party?
I was nominated as an elector, and in Michigan, you vote for the electors of the party, and they're the ones that then, if their candidate is certified by the State Board of Canvassers as the winner of the election, then they're the ones that cast the vote for the president.
And were you nominated for a specific district, or were you at large?
I was nominated for the 3rd district.
I'm trying to keep your voice up just because there are lots of attorneys. Could you just repeat your answer?
Yeah, I was nominated from the 3rd district.
And I believe you said that the election triggers whether or not you have additional duties. Is that correct? The election results.
The election result by the State Board of Canvassers determines whether you're elected. I was nominated according to the state board canvassers, I was not elected.
And the state board of canvassers certified the vote, are you aware when that happened?
No,
Well, not specific date, but you know, what month that was?
no, I don't remember.
If, well, okay, was it in 2020?
Right, after the election.
After the election, right, okay. And so you testified, I think, a little bit before, ahead of my question, that you were not elected as an elector because your candidate was not certified as the winner of the Michigan votes, did I get that right?
Right, the state board of canvassers of the state of Michigan did not nominate, or did not say that my candidate had won that state.
And who was your candidate in 2020?
Donald Trump.
Now, when your candidate is not certified as the winner of the votes, do you have any duties after that?
Not that I know aware of.
Did you perform any duties after that?
No.
Now, in December of 2020, did you receive any phone calls regarding coming to Lansing?
Yes.
Do you recall when you received that phone call?
No.
Are you able to tell us if it was before December 14, 2020?
Correct, it was before.
Do you remember who called you? And who was that?
Nisha Madden.
Okay, and is this someone that was known to you before December 14, 2020?
Yes.
About how long had you known Ms. Maddox?
I don't know. 3 or 4 years.
Would you recognize her if you saw her?
Yes.
Could you point her out in the courtroom and maybe describe what she's wearing?
Okay, I'll have to look around here. The white shirt.
And for purposes of the record, the witness has identified the defendant as Michonne Maddox.
Any objections, identification?
No objection to identification.
Identification is noted.
Okay, and I believe you said you had known Ms. Maddox for about 3 or 4 years? You have to answer yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. And when you received the call, were you able to recognize the voice as Ms. Maddox?
She's in my phone, so it came up on my phone.
And, did you have a conversation with Ms. Maddox?
Yes.
About how long did that conversation last?
Not more than a minute or a minute and a half, maybe.
Okay, and what was the context of that call?
She called to tell me there was going to be a meeting of the electors, and I questioned why. She then didn't really explain, and so I again asked the question why would they be meeting? And then she said that Trump lawyers asked her to call me to invite me to this meeting.
Okay, and when Ms. Maddox said that she was instructed to call you by the Trump lawyers, did you have a response to that?
Yes.
And what was your response?
I said, well, then have the Trump lawyers call me and I'll be happy to talk to them.
And did the conversation continue after that?
No, she hung up.
Were there any additional calls, from Ms. Maddox? Okay, did you ever get an answer during that call about why the electors were meeting?
No,
Did you go to the meeting?
no,
Did you ever even get a chance to say whether or not you were going to come to the meeting? Nothing further to witness, Shirley.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Ms. Land, my name is Mary Chartier. Because of the unusual courtroom setup, you've got to move a little bit to your right to chat with me. So you said that, Ms. Maddox, I just want to make sure, said Mr. Trump's lawyers told her to contact you?
correct.
Did she give you any indication as to what the lawyers wanted?
No,
Did she give you any indication as to who the lawyers were?
no,
And it sounds like that was a pretty quick phone call.
yes,
Now, you indicated that your prior position was as Secretary of State in Michigan. Does you oversee elections to some degree in that role?
could you repeat the question?
Sure. So, does anyone who is involved at all in the election process, would that person have reported to you when you were Secretary of State?
No.
No. Now, so your knowledge of election law, would you say it's low, medium, high, regular person? Are you fairly well versed?
When I was Secretary of State, I was very well versed. That's been many years ago and many laws have changed, so I'm not well versed now.
So when you indicated that you are not aware of any additional duties if your party's candidate is not selected by popular vote, let me ask you, suppose there is an election that's in dispute. Could there be other duties for those electors?
As I mentioned, the laws have changed since I've been Secretary of State. I do not have any knowledge of that.
Thank you. So if there are, you don't know that.
Correct.
Now, do you know Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And did you speak to him at all about this meeting on December 14th, 2020?
No.
Have you spoken to him in any form? I use spoken to, and I should have said communicated with. Email, text message, anything like that?
No.
So you have no idea what Mr. Haggard was told about that meeting?
No.
If he was told anything, correct?
Correct.
And you don't know what occurred at that meeting, correct?
Correct.
And you have no idea what Mr. Haggard may have believed on that date, correct? You have no idea what he intended on that date, correct? Nothing further, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Lane, you said that you shot Matta for 3 or 4 years. Did you have a good relationship with her at the time?
She served on state committee. We both served on state committee.
Did you speak often?
No.
When she called you and told you, testified that she called and told you that there was going to be a meeting of the electors, but you testified that she wouldn't tell you why, or was it she didn't know?
You'd have to ask her.
What did she tell you?
She didn't explain why.
Why? Do you recall the exact date, time of this
I
call?
do not remember.
Was it to your cell phone?
Correct.
Did she mention specifically from Trump's legal team requested your presence?
No.
But you said to her, just have Trump's legal team contact you directly.
Correct.
I guess why did you want that to happen as opposed to just continuing the conversation?
Because she did not answer why we were meeting.
Did you contact any legal counsel
Yes.
on that? And who did you contact?
My attorney.
And what did you say to your attorney?
Yeah, I think that's client privilege,
Yeah,
please.
I think that's delving into privilege, Your Honor.
Sure. We're done.
Thank you.
Was it from that conversation that you decided to not attend the meeting
Conversation.
with your attorney?
Now, that's client privilege. Can I object? Yeah, that's what my attorney should do.
Do you wanna know if her conversation with her attorney is what caused her not to appear
Yes.
for this meeting?
Respectfully, Your Honor, and I do think this is attorney-client privilege.
Agreed.
I recognize, I don't know if your lawyer is here, there's not a lawyer here for Ms. Land
Right.
that I'm aware of, but I do think this delves
Yes,
into
I'm
sure.
attorney-client communication.
I mean, there is, I don't know what rights I have to stand and object, but
Well,
But no.
you can say your name for the record, please.
I'm happy to enter appearance if the court will
Just
allow
state
it.
your name, Steve. sir.
Cole Lucier,
Okay,
COLELUSSIER. I'm an attorney for,
Thank you. You do have the right to object for your client while she's on the stand.
well, then I happily will object and
Thank you.
instruction not to answer any questions about
Objection
communications.
sustained. I don't even know the relevance.
At some point, you decided that you were not going to attend the meeting, correct?
I didn't have information to make a decision. I didn't have enough information commission to make a decision.
You didn't attend the meeting.
I did not attend it.
Did you tell anybody else that you were not going to attend?
No,
You know Kathy Burden?
correct.
How long have you known her?
Oh, longer, maybe 10 years or so.
And you have a good relationship with her?
I believe so.
How about John Haggard? How long did you know him for?
Since I've been 18.
Since when?
Since I've been 18.
Did you contact either of them to say that you were not going to the meeting?
Excuse me, no.
Is it fair to say you didn't you didn't tell anybody else whether or not they should go to the meeting?
No.
When you were nominated as an elector, that's different than, when you were nominated, did you have an alternate?
Now, electors, the way I understand it, do not have alternates.
Did you send anybody in your place for the meeting?
No. No.
But you were originally one of the 16 nominated to potentially be an elector.
I was elected as an elector from the 3rd district, correct?
Did somebody take your place?
I have no idea. I did not go to the meeting.
George Brown on behalf of Mary Ann Henry. Good afternoon, Fran. Do you know my client, Mary Ann Henry?
I know who she is from political events, correct?
Now, her number's not in your phone, is it?
I don't know.
You haven't had any communications, or you never had any communications with my client about the 2020 election,
Correct.
about any meetings on December 14th, 2020?
Correct.
And you don't know anything that she would have known about any meetings or anything about the 2020 election, correct? No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes. Good afternoon, Ms. Lane. My name is George Danini. I represent Kathy Bird. Okay, you told us about a conversation that you had with Michelle Maddox. Were you talking to folks with the Trump campaign prior to December 14, 2020? Did you speak at all with Sean Flynn?
I don't know who Sean Flynn is, so no.
Okay. How about Mark Foster?
I don't know who Mark Foster is, so no.
Did you talk to anybody with the RNC prior to December 14, 2020?
I can't remember.
John Black?
I'm not sure who that is, so I'd say no.
Chris Velasco?
I don't know who Chris is, so
How
I'd
about,
say no.
how about Ronna McDaniel?
I do have talked to Ron.
Did you talk to Ronna McDaniel prior to December 14, 2020?
I don't remember doing that, but I don't know.
And obviously I'm talking about specifically about the election and this elector meeting.
Correct, I did not talk to her about that.
Did you talk to her at all about this notion that there were legal challenges to the election, court cases out there, and that something could happen after December 14, 2020, which is the date the electors were to meet?
No.
You never had a conversation with her about that? How about Laura Cox?
I talked to Laura Cox.
About this issue?
Correct.
Okay. Did Laura Cox talk to you prior to December 14, 2020 and ask you to show up to the Michigan Republican Party headquarters on December 14, 2020?
No.
She did not say that?
No.
Okay. And so did she tell you anything about a ceremony to honor the electors?
I had called her, and she had told me there was gonna be a ceremony to honor the electors and that the work that they did on behalf
Right. And so, you were one of the people that was elected as an elector on August 29th and 30th, 2020 at the Michigan Republican State Convention.
I was elected then to the third district elected position.
Yeah. Let me just hand you this document. I just want to see if you've ever seen it before. I'm handing the witness Defense Exhibit A, which has already been admitted. Have you ever seen that document before?
No. Who printed it?
Well, it's a state convention document, but you haven't seen that before, is
No.
that fair? But it correctly identifies you as the elector for the state of Michigan representing District 3.
Correct.
And I noticed you were careful with your wording on direct exam about being an elector nominee. Did you prepare for your testimony prior to today with the AG's office?
No, I know that as an elector, I was nominated.
Okay. Do you see at the top? Can you read that into the record, please?
Certification of the Republican personal electors elected at the Michigan Republican State Convention.
It says elected, right?
Well, I don't know where this document is from, so it's really hard for me to create an opinion on something that I don't know where it's from.
All right, but you were an elector for the Republican Party for the 2020 election, correct?
Correct.
And you see Kathy Burton's there as the at-large, one of the two at-large electors?
Correct.
And you said on direct examination that as an elector, if your candidate, and your candidate was Mr. Trump, right?
Correct.
Is certified by the State Board of Canvassers, then they cast a vote for president. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a few steps in between that, but correct.
Okay. And you said you used to be the Secretary of State for the state of Michigan, right?
Correct.
The laws were different then, but you oversaw 2 presidential elections, correct?
I saw 2 presidential elections, but the federal folks run the presidential.
Federal folks, but for example, when you were the Secretary of State, you signed off on the certificate of votes for 2004?
For the candidates that ran on the ballot.
Fair,
Right.
for those 16 electors. No.
These are elected at a party convention.
I understand. You signed, though, in 2004, the official certificate of votes for the 2004 election.
For candidates that ran in Michigan, if they won, yes.
Correct, for the state of Michigan, but
Right.
in this instance, for those votes for president. Yes?
Correct, but that is only signed after the State Board of Canvassers certifies it. So once the State Board of Canvassers has certified the election, then the Secretary of State signs off.
Sure. And when you were Secretary of State, you were the keeper of the seal, the state seal, right?
Yes,
It was up to you to place the state seal on official state of Michigan documents, fair?
correct. After the Board of Canvassers certified the election.
We're on the same page on that, man. You don't have to keep saying that, but you're certainly welcome to. I understand. We're talking about December 14, 2020 here in this instance, or a similar date in the prior years. All right. And again, you did that in 2004 and 2008, right?
Correct.
Do you remember something about a draft resolution that was floating around from the 14th district?
No,
You don't remember sending that to Laura Cox?
no.
Something about where the Republicans from the 14th district were essentially putting together a resolution to have the state legislature vote for the Trump electors. You don't remember anything about that?
I get thousands of emails, I do not, from different district parties and district chairs, and I don't remember sending it.
And I'm sure you get lots, but this happened to be something that you received and sent to Laura Cox.
I sent a lot of things to Laura Cox, she was the state party chairman.
Okay, sent her a lot of things
I
in the
sent
lead
her
up
a lot of things,
to December 14, 2020.
on all different issues. I sent her a lot of.
And again, I'm just coming back to, so Laura Cox, you called her, you said, and
Correct.
she told you about a ceremony.
Correct.
And did she say that it was to honor the electors for being chosen as electors?
She said it was to celebrate the work that we all did in this election, and she thought that would be a good opportunity to do that. She did not tell me where it was or when it was. I stopped her before she went farther, and I still couldn't understand why we were meeting.
A celebration wasn't a sufficient reason?
No,
Okay. You didn't care about being honored, is that a fair conclusion?
she didn't say we were gonna be honored. That's not what she
Celebrated?
said. No.
What did she say?
She's going to have a celebration party to thank you for all the work you've done to do that. I did not need a thank you.
And is that why you didn't go? Because you didn't need a thank you?
I never got an answer as to what the purpose of this was. And without more information, I was not going to make a decision. And I never got any information.
Can I have exhibit 7, please?
I'm handing the witness People's Exhibit 7. I'm directing our attention to page 3. Prior to December 14, 2020, have you ever seen that document?
No, but again, I don't know what this is from. Is this from the state of Michigan?
Well, let's not worry about where it's from, who drafted it, but the question is very specific. Did you see that document prior to December 14, 2020?
No, I don't know what this is.
Okay, and so that document didn't give you pause or cause you not to be present on December 14, 2020.
I've never seen this before that, no. I saw it in the newspaper afterwards, now that I've seen it on the pages.
Okay, so you did see it afterwards, fair?
In the paper, yes.
And look, really what I'm trying to get at is, without going into your council's conversations, other than not caring about being celebrated, why else did you not show up on December 14, 2020?
As I mentioned before, I asked multiple times why, and no one ever gave me an answer.
Okay.
And without information, I could not make a decision.
Another document I want to show you. It's Defense Exhibit B. Have you ever seen that document now?
No. No,
So you've never seen it, is that right?
no.
So you're not aware that that was created by Laura Cox?
No.
Objection on a lack of foundation.
I'm trying to get a little bit behind her understanding about the document.
She said she's never seen it.
Never seen it.
All right.
Yeah, she's just saying.
And you talked about when you were Secretary of State, that was 10, 12 years ago, the laws have changed. I'm not gonna get into it. Did you know anything about 1960 Hawaii, the circumstance that happened there? You never heard of that? going to hand you People's 6 and People's 5. Those are the certificate of ascertainment and the certificate of votes for the 2016 election. Okay?
2016.
2016. I'm also going to hand you the certificate of ascertainment for 2020 and the certificate of votes for 2020 as well. 2020, 3 and 4, People's 3 and 4. Okay? Now, I know it's a while ago, but you told us that you were the Secretary of State for the 2004 and 2008 elections.
Give me just a moment, there's a microphone right there, so you can make sure you don't put the paper on the mic, so she can't hear what's being said. Okay, thank you.
Do those, and I know it's been some time, ma'am, but do those look similar to what you would have prepared back in 2004 and 2008?
I'll object to that, Your Honor.
Yeah, I can prepare it.
There's an objection.
Obviously, Ms. Land's direct testimony was very limited to a particular set of facts that were much more recent than over a decade ago when she was Secretary of State. To ask her to read this document and compare it to something she would also know evidence that she's seen is, I think, very much objectionable.
My understanding of a lawyer when a witness is testifying is they're there to object to either issues of privilege or issues that may implicate the Fifth Amendment. It's not to be a lawyer essentially within the proceeding itself objecting on evidentiary rules or outside the scope. So respectfully, I object to that objection.
I would agree, unless you believe that this is something that would implicate her in some way.
No, I have no.
Okay, then I'll allow you to withdraw that objection.
I'll withdraw.
Thank you.
So, ma'am, and that's,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, sure, and let me just preface it with, I think I said you prepared it, but you didn't prepare it. Okay, here's the question. I know it's about a decade ago, and really these are just kind of some general questions. I don't think they're going to be all that offensive. 2004 and 2008, you were the Secretary of State. You played a role in signing off on the certificate of votes and the certificate of ascertainment for those 2 presidential election years. True or false?
Republicans didn't win during my administration.
Well, President Bush certainly won.
He didn't win the state of Michigan.
Okay, fair. Okay, so then you didn't prepare those documents at all? It's not a Republican. You're not a Republican as the Secretary of State. You're a state functionary.
Right. And this
So
was-
it doesn't matter which party won.
question?
Well, okay, so the question again is, did you, in your role as Secretary of State in 2004 and 2008, sign off on, forget, strike prepare, the certificate of votes and the certificate of ascertainment for those 2 presidential years?
I don't remember doing it, but obviously the Secretary of State did. And these are presented and done by the Elections Director, Chris Thomas.
Fair, okay, and the directions elector today is Mr. Brader, yes? All right, so you had somebody who was the elections person, who was your right-hand man, he handled kind of all that stuff then.
Actually, they're independent.
Was that a question that the elections person is her right-hand man? That's a question, ma'am.
Yeah, that is incorrect. The Elections Director is independent within the Secretary of State.
I guess where I'm going is, for those 2, let's look at the 2 blue border certificate of votes. Take a look at them. Does that appear to be an official document?
I do not know. It was a long time ago. I do not remember what the,
Does it bear the seal of the state of Michigan?
well, a modified one, yes.
Does it have a blue border?
Yes, it does.
Can you tell us, as a former Secretary of State, what the significance of the blue border is for official state of Michigan documents?
No,
Is that a thing?
I do not know.
And do you have any knowledge about, in the election law space, the need to have a certificate of votes and a certificate of ascertainment to go to be counted as true votes. Are you aware of that?
No,
You have no knowledge of that?
no.
Your Honor, I don't have anything else.
Briefly, good afternoon, ma'am. My name's Paul Stavlin, I represent Amy Fichinello. I just have a question. Were you, at some point prior to this past summer, you were interviewed by a representative from the Attorney General's office, an investigator named Investigator Schott?
I don't remember his name.
Okay, do you recognize that guy over there with the blue tie and gray suit?
Yeah.
Okay. He interviewed you over Zoom or Windows meetings or something like that?
No, it was in person, actually.
I'm sorry?
It was in person.
It was in person. Okay. Where was it in person?
The attorney's office.
At your attorney's office?
So yes.
Yes.
Okay. So he came to the attorney's office and you were there and that's where he interviewed you?
Grand Rapids Attorney's Office.
Excuse me?
I was interviewed by the Attorney General in my Grand Rapids Attorney's office, and I don't remember who was there.
Okay. When you say Attorney General, were you talking about a lawyer from the Attorney General's office or an investigator? The man
Both.
standing right there.
Both.
Okay. And that was when? Okay. Was it this year, 2023?
This summer.
Yes?
Yes, I think so. I don't remember.
Okay. Prior to that, were you ever approached by someone from the January 6th committee, the congressional committee
No.
investigating January 6th?
No.
Okay. Again, 1 second. Ma'am, did you give a deposition regarding the December 14th, 2020 date? Did you give a deposition about the circumstances surrounding that on October 4th, 2022?
I don't remember the date. I talked to the Attorney General's office.
Okay, other than the Attorney General's office, did you provide a deposition in any civil case or in any other situation? No? Okay, have you ever testified under oath at all about these facts?
No, this is the first.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, all right, ma'am, then I have no further questions, thank you.
Plain Sullivan from Shell Rundgren. As an elector, you seem to know a fair amount about that. Would that be accurate?
I know some things.
You know some things about it, okay. When you narrow it to August of 2020, when you were nominated to be an elector, do you get a handbook or anything as to what your duties are?
No.
So how do you acquire the knowledge of what a duty of an elector is?
Well, I know a little bit by the fact I've lived a long time. And then, I assumed that the state party, when the time would come, would inform me of the responsibilities.
But you don't know that
No.
they do that. And do you recall if you particularly were informed as to your duties following August of 2020?
No.
So you wouldn't know if any of the electors were informed of their duties, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know Michelle Lundgren?
I know who it is, I don't know.
Okay. Would that, by the method of that response, I mean, you don't have any personal relationship
No,
with her?
correct.
You don't have any professional relationship with her, is that correct? She's not in your phone, is that correct?
I don't know, we have to check.
Okay. You don't, but you don't today independently recall that she's in your phone?
I have 30,000 people,
Okay. And do you know if you've ever communicated by phone or in any means with her?
not that I recall.
So you might have, but you don't recall now?
Correct.
Okay, so certainly nothing that would stand out as a communication threat. And you had no conversations with her regarding the occurrences on December 14th, is that correct? And you don't have any idea what went on December 14th, correct? And you don't know what occurred at the meeting, correct?
Correct.
And you don't know what Michelle's role was or wasn't, correct? You don't know what she heard or didn't hear, correct? You don't know what she might have spoken up to at the meeting, if that occurred, do you?
Correct.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Apparently bad at cleanup.
That's what you get for going with us.
Yes. Ms. Lane, you mentioned both a celebration and a meeting, correct?
A meeting to celebrate.
A meeting to celebrate.
Correct. A coming together to celebrate.
Okay, but I take from your responses to numerous questions by different attorneys that you were not satisfied with the answer you got as to why you were celebrating?
Why we needed to go to a meeting to celebrate at that specific time. Why?
Okay. If you gotta work on a Friday and you wanna go meet, do you need a meeting to do that? A reason to do that?
Yes,
You do,
yes, I do.
okay. Are you naturally suspicious?
I naturally am very busy. And I have many commitments, and it's December, and it's Christmas.
So it sounds like you felt like you're a little put out by this request?
I felt like they needed to give me a reason why we were doing this.
You didn't need to be thanked?
I already was thanked.
Thanks, man.
Very briefly.
Now, Ms. Land, you referenced having an in-person meeting at your attorney's office in Grand Rapids, is that correct?
Correct,
And you didn't recall who from the Attorney General's office was there?
correct.
Do you recall the term investigative subpoena?
Yes, I had to go to this meeting. This wasn't a choice.
So
That I
was-
do remember.
Was that the meeting in the Grand Rapids office?
Correct.
And that was, if I told you that was on October 4th, 2020, does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
22, sorry. Okay.
This witness be excused.
Yes, please.
Okay, first let me advise you, there's a sequestration order, so you're not allowed to talk about any portions of your testimony with any other witness, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. You can call your next.
Commissioner Tony's in there.
He's coming out.
Who did you call as your next witness?
Tony's in.
you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
Thank you, you can have a seat. Okay, there's a microphone that's in front of you, the lady behind you is the court reporter, she has to take down everything being stated here today, okay?
Okay.
Your voice seems loud and clear, if you can keep it up that way, it'll be helpful. We have a full courtroom, and we don't have the best acoustics in here, okay?
Okay.
If there's a objection from any of the attorneys, and there are about 8 of them in the room on this case right now, if you hear an objection, you would hold any response, even if you're mid-sentence, okay?
Okay.
I'll make a ruling on the objection, and then I'll tell you if you can give that answer or not. I want you to state your first and last name and spell both.
Anthony Zammit, Anthony, Zammit.
Proceed, Counsel.
Good afternoon, sir. In 2020, did you work for the Michigan Republican Party?
I did.
And in what capacity?
I was the communications director.
And how long did you work for the Michigan Republican Party?
I worked there from 2017 to 2021.
And were you always the communications director?
I was not.
What other positions did you hold within the party?
I was previously the deputy communications director, and I was also the deputy data director.
Now, in 2020, when you were the communications director, what were your responsibilities?
My job was primarily to prepare statements for the GOP to review the mail that we sent out and to work with the press.
And who was your supervisor?
My supervisor was the executive director, Mike Ambrosini.
And did you also work for Laura Cox?
I did.
Now, in December of 2020, did you hear anything about a meeting that was to be held at the Michigan Republican Party headquarters in Lansing?
I was contacted the day before the meeting by Chairwoman Cox and was part of a conference call where it was discussed.
Okay. And would this be December 13th, 2020?
This would be.
Okay. And do you recall who all was on the conference call?
To my recollection, it was myself, Chairwoman Cox, our legal counsel, Sue Sandler, and the political director, Troy Hudson.
And were you given some instructions or told what this meeting was supposed to, what this meeting would entail?
I was.
And this was during that call?
Correct.
And what was your understanding of the meeting after the call?
My understanding was that we would be holding a meeting with the Republican slate of electors where they would sign a document that would say that if court evidence found that there was any irregularities during the preceding time, that the slate of electors would be willing to serve as Michigan's official electors for the 2020 election.
Did you ever actually see that document?
I saw it, but I did not read it.
And did you see it before or before that call on December 13th?
No, I saw it the day of the actual meeting.
And you said, but you did not read it?
I did not read it.
Okay. Were you asked to contact any of the candidates for elector to come to the headquarters?
I was not.
Do you know how the electors were contacted?
To my knowledge, Stu Foster, who served as deputy political director, contacted some of those folks, but that was the only knowledge I had of that.
And on December 14th, 2020, were you actually at the Michigan Republican Party
I
headquarters?
was.
Is that at 520 Seymour in the city of Lansing?
It is.
Do you know who all was supposed to be in attendance for this meeting?
My understanding was that it was supposed to be a smaller staff. We were technically closed down because of COVID. So from the MIGOP, I was to be there. Troy Hudson, the political director, was to be there. Henrietta Toe, who was our chief financial officer, was to be there. The lawyers on site.
And when you say some lawyers on site, were they Michigan GOP lawyers or?
They were not. They were from the Trump campaign.
And do you know their names?
The only one I know for certain was Sean Flynn, who was the Michigan counsel for the campaign.
And did the Trump lawyers, did they have their own independent access to the building, or were they just coming to this meeting?
Sean Flynn had worked in the building probably since August.
What time did you arrive at the headquarters on December 14th?
It would have been fairly early in the morning. I don't remember the specific time.
Was anyone else there when you got there?
There was already quite a few people there. The slate of electors had not arrived yet, but there were already some lawyers that were there, and I believe Troy may have already been there as well.
Okay. And did you do anything to prepare the building or the conference room for the meeting?
No.
Did you, do you know what time the electors began to arrive?
It probably would have been around 10 or 11 in the morning. It was mid-morning.
And did you recognize the electors as they arrived?
I recognize some of them, yes.
And which ones did you recognize, if you recall?
I can recall Michonne Maddock. I can recall Kathy Burden, Maida Rodriguez, Stan Grott, just off the top of my head, John Haggard,
Okay.
Hank Cho.
Now, was anything done as the electors came into the building to make sure that the meeting was or was not recorded?
We collected cell phones.
And at whose direction were you collecting cell phones?
It was asked the day before when we were discussing whether or not I would be there. It was decided that I would be there to deal with any press and also to help with administrative tasks such as collecting cell phones. It wasn't out of the ordinary for us to do that for some meetings, just because with phones today, everyone has a recording device.
And did you collect all the cell phones?
We did,
Okay. And where did you keep them?
just in a box.
And do you know where the meeting was held within the headquarters?
It was held in the basement.
And could you describe the meeting room in the basement?
It was a room that we used for trainings. So a fairly large room that was set up with tables in a square formation.
And were you there when the meeting began?
I was there when the meeting began.
Okay, and who all was present right before the meeting began?
What do you mean?
Like, who was present at the meeting?
At that meeting, to my recollection, were the slate of electors and the lawyer for the Trump team, Sean Flynn.
And you said you were present for the beginning of the meeting, is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you stay during the meeting?
I went back up to my office at a certain point.
Okay, is there ever a point in time where you returned to the basement?
Yes.
Do you know about how long you were in your office?
I was probably up there for at least an hour.
Do you know, did you go back to the basement on your own, or were you asked to come down?
I was asked to go down.
Do you know who asked you to come down?
Troy Hudson did.
And when you went back into the basement, what do you see?
They were wrapping up the meeting and they were beginning to sign a document.
And when you say the document, what document are you referring to?
I don't know. I didn't read the document, but there was a signed page was for signatures that was on the table.
And you said signatures as in more than one?
Yes.
And I know you said you didn't read the document. Did you recognize this as a document that you had seen before December 14th, 2020?
No.
And when you said they began to sign the document, who was signing it?
The Republican slate of electors.
And the document that they're signing, where is it in the basement room?
It was on a table. There were 3 different copies, and so people had to go in a circle to sign the document.
So, is it fair to say they were signing it in triplicate?
Yes.
Did you ever get a chance to see that document after it was signed?
I saw Sean Flynn take it out from the basement. But after that, I didn't see it again.
Or did you get a chance to read the document?
I did not.
And you said the last time you saw the document, Sean Flynn had it?
Correct.
And who did he work for?
He worked for the Trump campaign.
After
the electors sign this document in triplicate, what happens next?
Sean, well, the reason I had been sent back down was to make an announcement. My understanding was that we were trying to keep this from being a public event, because we didn't want there to be any sort of confusion that the official slate of electors was meeting, that this meeting was for them to sign something that they were willing to serve as electors. And it had gotten to Troy and that, they were planning to walk down to the Capitol. And so Troy asked me to ask them not to go to the Capitol.
Okay, and I'm gonna stop you there because you said something about an official slate of electors. And when you say official slate of electors, which slate are you referring to?
The duly elected electors,
Okay, would that be from the Democratic Party?
yes.
Now, you said that Troy Hudson,
Correct.
asked you to make an announcement asking the electors not to go to the Capitol?
Correct. And so what I said was that this request, that we were not asking them to go to the Capitol, that they could do what they wanted at the end of the day, but that was not a request the Republican Party of Michigan was making.
And did you go to the Capitol?
I did not.
To your knowledge, did any of the electors go to the Capitol? And not based on what you saw later, but just based on, December 14th, 2020, not talking about reports.
No, some were definitely going to go, others, I know were planning not to go. They decided that they didn't feel comfortable with that.
Do you remember the names of some of the electors that were definitely going to go?
I know Michonne Maddox was going to definitely go.
Do you remember any of the other electors?
Marion Sher.
And after you made the announcement that going to the Capitol was not required, did you do anything else as it related to the meeting at the headquarters?
It was requested that a photo be taken to document the event. Again, we had been trying to avoid there being photos and whatnot, but several of the electors or the Republican slate was insistent on it. And so we discussed it, and it was decided that Ken Thompson would take a photo to document that the event occurred
And where was that photo taken?
in the basement of the MIT.
Okay. And how many photos were taken?
To my knowledge, just one.
Do you know what happened with that photo?
I do not.
And you said Ken Thompson took the photograph, correct? Now, at the time, at December 14th, 2020, Ken Thompson, was he a candidate for elector?
He had not been, but he had been chosen as replacement.
And do you know when when he was chosen as a replacement?
I do not. I believe that they voted on that in the basement.
So it would have been that same day?
I believe so.
Okay. After the photograph was taken, what, if anything, do you do next?
At that point, I went back upstairs with Sean Flynn and then departed for the day.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Zamet. Hi, my name is Mary Chartier. Again, we've got a bit of an unusual setting, so you've got to turn toward me, or you can just turn your head, whatever it may be. So I want to get back to this December 13th, 2020 phone call. You said there was at least one lawyer on the phone?
No, not, well, yes, Sue Sandler, who was the counsel for the MIT.
So he was on the telephone. I want to make sure I understand your testimony. And the conversation of what was about having the electors sign a document the next day.
Correct.
And the document was essentially, if something changed in the process, meaning President Trump was determined to be the winner of the state of Michigan, the electors then would be willing to, or their votes would be cast for President Trump. Is that accurate?
That was my understanding.
And that was your understanding. Was there any confusion on the telephone?
No,
And you said you were not emailed a document prepared by Ms. Cox?
not to my recollection.
Then what was the next thing you did about the meeting for the next day? Did that occur on December 14th, or did you have more work to do on the 13th?
No, that was, I just went in the next day.
So you didn't call anyone, email anyone, anything on December 13th about the meeting,
No.
following day? What time did you get in the next day?
It would have been early in the morning, probably 8 or 9 o'clock.
You said that you saw a document on December 14th, 2020, but you didn't read it. Is that when you came into the office, or are you talking about later on in the meeting?
There were 2 documents. There was the first document that was prepared by the MIGOP that was in the reception area, which we brought the slate up 2 by 2 to review that document. And then there was a secondary document I saw them sign down in the basement of the MIGOP.
So the first document you're referring to, you said we brought people up 2 by 2. Who are you referring to as we?
Myself and Troy Hudson.
And what did that document say?
I didn't review it.
You didn't review it.
No.
And you brought people up 2 by 2, like on the arc, right? So how did you decide who was going with who?
It was fairly random.
Okay. Do you recognize Mr. Haggard in the courtroom?
I do.
Is this gentleman to my right?
It is.
Did you know Mr. Haggard before that day?
Just in passing.
And do you remember who he walked up with?
I do not.
Did you explain what the document was, or just have them sign it?
We were just bringing them up. I wasn't a lawyer, so I didn't feel comfortable explaining what the document was.
Did anyone explain to them what the document was?
I'm not sure.
Oh, well, you were there, so do you remember anyone explaining what the document was?
I don't, but I wasn't in the basement when there was a lawyer in the basement, so I don't know if he did or didn't.
Okay, so I wanna break that down a little bit, just to make sure that we really go through everything.
Yeah.
So you said you had a document, you and Mr. Hudson,
Correct.
and then you were calling people up from the basement 2 by 2 to sign it?
Correct.
From the basement to where, the first floor?
Correct.
And was there a conference room or
No,
out in the hallway?
it's just a reception area.
Just a reception area? So did you just say, who went down in the basement to get people, you or Mr. Hudson?
We alternated.
So for example, if you went down, you would say, okay, I need 2 electors, or did you just point out 2 people and say, come with me?
I can't recall. I think it was just in whatever document order the documents were printed in, because they were specific to each person. So whoever's documents we had at that point, we were just bringing up.
Is there a reason you only did 2 people, only because you had 2 documents at the time, or?
The reception area for the MIG, very small area.
Okay, so they would come up, so you didn't read that document,
No.
correct? And to your knowledge, no one told anyone what the document was, were the ones where they were signing 2 by 2, correct?
Correct.
And then those were documents, they were signing individual documents with their names on it?
I believe so.
Not a massive group document?
Correct.
So you don't, again, didn't read that document, I just
did
wanna
not.
make sure. Now, there was no lawyer with you or Mr. Hudson?
No.
Okay, now, what's going on in the basement? Is there a lawyer down there?
Sean Flynn, the lawyer for the Trump meeting, was down there at certain points. I'm not sure at what points he was down there.
So there's at least 1 lawyer down there. Any other lawyers to your knowledge?
There was at least 1 other lawyer in the building. I believe there might have been multiple in the conference room that day.
How do you know or think there were multiple?
Just by conversations that I heard walking by, they could have been people on speakerphone now.
Okay, so just by the things that they were saying?
Yeah.
Sounded kind of lawyerly?
No, it sounded like there was multiple people talking about legal discussions, but again, I didn't listen.
What about a gentleman named Ian Norton? Was he there?
He came with Michonne Maddock. Mr. Norton tried to gain entry into the building with a camera crew. And again, I was told that this meeting was a private meeting. We didn't want it to be construed as something that it wasn't, and so we weren't allowed to let in the media or any camera crews. And so I told him that he couldn't come to the building and asked him to leave.
So Mr. Norton was not allowed in the building?
He stepped in briefly to speak with the Trump lawyer, as well as someone from the Trump campaign on the phone, and then waited in the parking lot with his camera crew.
Do you know who he spoke to from the Trump campaign on the phone?
I do not.
Did you overhear any part of that conversation?
I did not.
Then he waited out in the parking lot.
Correct.
So there's Sean Flynn, who's a lawyer in the building, and then you think there are other lawyers in the building, but again, you don't know exactly.
Correct.
Okay, just wanna make sure I'm clear on that. And then, so you're up on the first floor with Mr. Hudson, bringing people up 2 by 2 to sign documents. as it relates to the basement, when the electors are down there, are you down there at any point in time other than to just bring them up?
No, I was down there for the start of the meeting when they gavelled it in, then I was down there at the very end to make the announcement, and that was really the only time that I was down in the basement.
Who gavelled the meeting in?
Sean Flynn.
Do you know what he said when he gavelled the meeting in?
I don't, I left.
Do you recall anything that you overheard what electors were being told about the document that was either downstairs or the purpose of the meeting or anything?
I did not.
You indicated that Mr. Flynn took the documents that you had people sign, or that there were, you said there was another document in the
From the
basement?
basement.
And where was the document in the basement that you saw when you went down there?
It had been on, there was a small circular table that the document was on, and they had people go around and sign the document around that table. He then collected it and took it upstairs.
So did you see 3 signature pages
I
and
did.
essentially people walking around signing that?
Correct,
And then Mr. Flynn took that document from the basement?
correct.
Did he have it in his hand, or I should say the 3 signature pages, those documents, did he have them in his hand? He put them in an envelope, do you remember?
He had them in his hand.
Had them in his hand? Did you see him go to his office then?
Well, at that point, he was walking back towards the conference room.
And who was in the conference room?
Again, I didn't look in, he was just headed towards the conference room. He turned into the conference room as I walked to my office to get my vote.
To your knowledge, Mr. Haggard wasn't in the conference room.
No.
He would have been in the basement or signing the document that you and Mr. Hudson had him come up to sign, correct?
When the meeting was adjourned, I don't believe any of the electors stayed within the building. Some met in the parking lot outside, but most of the electors just left.
Did Mr. Flynn say anything to you when he had the document in his hand?
He did, he said, "Can you believe that I have to send this to the Secretary of State, the Vice President, and the National Archives?"
That was Mr. Flynn saying that.
Correct.
You didn't hear him say anything like that in the basement, did you?
I did not.
And then you were asked by Mr. Hudson to go and talk to people in the basement about going to the Capitol.
Correct.
Why did Mr. Hudson not tell people not to go to the Capitol?
Well, usually, things like that I dealt with because it was a media matter, it was a communications point.
A media matter, meaning,
Meaning that it involved the perception of the party within the public.
okay, so there might be publicity about this.
Correct.
When you got the phone call on December 13th about the meeting the following day, did you, it might sound like a silly question, but did you call the police or anything to report, hey, I think there's gonna be a crime occurring tomorrow?
No,
And on any time on December 14th, did you call the police and say, I think there's a crime occurring here at the Republican Party headquarters?
no.
How did you contact anyone from the government? Or did they contact you? Maybe that's a better question.
I contacted someone that was with the January 6th investigation.
Was that Representative Cheney?
It was.
And when did you do that?
I did that after the case was referred to the federal authorities.
So approximately when?
January
January of
2022.
2022.
Correct.
And then did you contact anyone else, anyone in the media, anything like that?
I've spoken with Craig Longer several times.
Did you contact him or did he contact you?
I contacted him
When did you contact him? Before or after you spoke to or contacted Representative Cheney?
after I contacted Representative Cheney.
About how long after?
Well, approximately a week.
What was the purpose for that?
To find out who that I could get in touch with, because I thought that there was people that, I thought that the story that had been written, there was other sides to it that needed to be talked about.
What do you mean by that?
I thought not necessarily the entire truth had come out of the story.
What, I'm just not sure what story you're referring to.
There was a story about the fact that the case had been referred back to the federal authorities, and it was talking about the various, the slate of electors, that they had, basically I thought that several of the people that were involved in this weren't implicated, and that a lot of the electors were not necessarily responsible for what had happened.
So I just wanna make sure I'm clear. So you contacted Representative Cheney and then you contacted a reporter.
Correct.
And it's because essentially the electors were being cast as having, and I don't wanna put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, having knowingly committed a crime and you did that believe that to be the case.
Correct.
Then you also subsequently spoke with people from the Attorney General's office.
Correct.
Did you share that philosophy with them as well?
I did.
And that was based on your experience at the meeting?
Correct.
And that was based on your experience leading up to the meeting and then after the meeting as well?
Correct.
Is it your opinion, having been at the meeting with all the facts and circumstances, that the electors were not fully informed as to what others may be doing with that document?
Your Honor, I'm going to object that, ask him to draw a conclusion that I don't believe the foundation is gonna make, he has personal knowledge to make that conclusion, or even render that opinion.
You going to respond to the objection?
Mr. Zamet was, and I can ask him additional questions, but Mr. Zamet participated in a telephone call on December 13th. He was actually present on December 14th. He has been the witness with the most intimate knowledge so far of what was occurring on December 14th, 2020. This witness actually took it upon himself to contact individuals to say that at least some of the electors were being cast in a light that was untrue. I think the basis for that is extremely relevant.
And I'll add, if I may, Your
Is
Honor.
he joining into my objection?
No,
We're not sure. What's your objection?
I'm gonna articulate another reason to oppose the objection, if the court will allow. And this witness told the AG's office investigator exactly about his concerns before they indicted the case.
Well, may I respond now, Your Honor? This witness testified he was not in the basement during the entirety of the meeting, so he cannot attest to what the defendants were or were not told or what their intent was. He is not qualified to draw that conclusion. He may have opinions, but he is not competent to draw that legal conclusion about their guilt or innocence. That is for the trier of fact, and we're not even into that.
Respectfully, Your Honor, he's been the most competent witness they've put on in almost 2 days. He's the only person who was there. It seems like another individual who was in the basement, Sean Flynn, would be right to ask these questions to. He's not on the government's witness list. He's the lawyer who was down there. I think Mr. Zamet was in the building. He's overhearing conversations both from the electors, people on the phone, hearing bits and pieces when he goes down to the basement. He's been more than honest that he wasn't down there the entire time, but based on what he did hear and based on what he did witness, his opinion is valid. The court can weigh it, recognizing that he wasn't down there the entire time. But he is as close to what has happened in that basement as we have gotten after 2 full days.
Well, first and foremost, Mr. Zamet, and he has been very forthright, did not even see the documents that the defendants were signing. And just because he is the closest that we've gotten to the basement, first of all, he's not the last witness, and him being the closest to what's gotten in the basement does not render him competent to draw a conclusion on the guilt, innocence, or intent of the defendants.
The attorney, sorry, Your Honor, may I?
No, you can continue.
The Attorney General has asked him about the documents to then say, well, you didn't say them. You, respectfully, they're the ones who brought them up with Mr. Zamet. And then we pursued that with him.
And with respect, Your Honor, he did see the document that was signed. They think it's a 2-page document. We think it's a 1-page document. This witness saw a 1-page document signed in the basement, so we certainly can talk about that.
Your question again was?
It's been so long.
Counsel was asking this witness to give an opinion on the culpability of the defendants, which I do not believe is a legitimate question.
Respectfully, I don't believe that was my question. I believe my question was, is the reason that he contacted the reporter and then Representative Cheney was because he did not believe that the electors, at least some of them, not all of them, because I think he said the word some, at least some of them were not criminally culpable as they were being portrayed.
I think the court needs to hear why this witness made the call. So I think it's an appropriate question.
I believe the witness answered that question, that's why he did call Representative Cheney and, Fred Maugher. But I believe the question that I had went a little further, asking
About
about his opinion on the guilt of innocence.
culpability.
Yes.
Well, he can't draw that conclusion, so whatever value it has, it doesn't go to probable cause anyways.
Thank you.
So, objection overruled, you can answer the question.
Thank you. Mr. Sienna, I'm gonna try to repeat the question again, and I may not get it right this third time. Was the reason that you contacted Representative Cheney and the reporters because you believed at least some of the electors were not criminally culpable as they were being portrayed?
That is correct.
And did you share that sentiment with the Attorney General's office?
I did.
What did you base your opinion on, only facts and circumstances, when you believed that they were being unfairly cast?
I think a lot of folks listen to lawyers. I think it's a position of authority, and I think that they were being told something by a lawyer that they needed to sign certain documents so that Michigan would not be disenfranchised.
Was the lawyer you're referring to Sean Flynn?
Well, my understanding about the whole meeting was the reason why we were meeting that day, as I was told by our lawyer for the party, was because it happened in the past. We were signing these documents so that our state would not be disenfranchised, and that's why I was there in the first place.
So the lawyer, at least one of the lawyers you're referring to is the Stuart Sandler?
Correct.
And then Sean Flynn, we also know, was in the building.
Correct.
There might have been other lawyers as well. I think you think there were. And is that correct, sir?
Correct.
And then Ian Northam was in the parking lot.
Correct.
And so you were told on the telephone, and you believe this was again articulated at the meeting, was that Michigan needed to have the Republican electors sign this document so that Michigan would not lose its electoral votes if essentially the Michigan was reversed and President Trump was found to have won the state of Michigan. Is that a fair summary?
Correct.
And were you told there was actually a historical basis for this type of contingency plan?
I was.
And what was the historical basis?
1960 in Hawaii.
1960 in Hawaii. Had you heard about that case before?
I had known there was a recount, but I wasn't sure of the specifics.
Were you told any of the specifics?
Not really.
Were you told that essentially an alternate slate of electors voted as a contingency plan in case the votes in Hawaii were switched?
I was.
And that's what led you to believe that this meeting and the electors coming was on solid ground?
Correct.
And it's your opinion, based on what you witnessed and what you heard, that at least the people at the meeting were informed of that as well?
I'm not sure on that. I did not
Okay.
overhear that.
But based on what you witnessed and observed and overheard, you have no reason to believe that anyone had another agenda in terms of the electors?
Not that I'm aware of.
One moment, please. And I guess to be clear, how often did you meet with the Attorney General's office once you contacted them?
I only met with them once.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I didn't hear his last response.
Oh, he said he met with them only once.
Thank you. Officers Haven and Alexander, Representative John Mehta. On December 14th, when you were at the party headquarters, what was the mood of the room when you were there?
I don't wanna say somber, but it wasn't like a celebratory note.
It was not a celebration of any kind?
Not that I saw, but then again, I wasn't in the room during that.
Was there any like pizza or cake or pop or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Any congratulations given to the electors by anybody?
Not that I know of.
You spoke with Laura Cox on the phone the day before, on the 13th?
Correct.
Did she tell you that this was gonna be a celebration for the electors?
She said that there was going to be a meeting for them, at headquarters, but again, it was more procedural is what we're talking about.
What were your responsibilities on the day of the meeting?
The day of the meeting that day, I was to help out administratively and with any type of help they might need in terms of collecting documents or doing the cell phone stuff, but my primary role was to keep out camera crews and to deal with any media that might show up.
Is this a normal responsibility to keep out camera crews?
Depending on what type of meeting we're having, yes.
Is it as simple as just locking the front door?
No, it's not, because reporters are a little bit more dogged than that.
You testified on direct that you said we collected the cell phones. Who is?
Troy Hudson was helping as well.
Okay. And is that normal as well?
It depends again on what type of meeting we were having. With everybody having basically a TV studio and a broadcasting studio in their pocket, if we were having a meeting that we didn't necessarily want to be public, we collected cell phones. I can think of at least 2 other times that we did such.
Now, on direct, you said there's 3 signature pages in the basement, right?
Correct.
But there was another document to be signed upstairs in the reception area?
Yes.
Did you see all 16 people sign that document?
Yes.
Two by two, correct?
Yep.
Was Mary Ann Henry present?
I believe so.
Did you witness if she was in the room witnessing people's signatures?
I did not.
Did you not witness it, or you did, or she did not witness it?
For the upstairs document or the downstairs
The
document?
upstairs document in the reception was.
I can't recall.
Okay. And to finish my question did you see Mary Ann Henry observing people's signatures?
I do not recall.
Fair enough. When did you become aware of the idea that this would be an alternate slate?
When you say alternate slate, do you mean, what do you mean by that?
On direct, the lady testified that this slate was to be signed in the event that Donald Trump was to be found the true winner of Michigan.
Well, my understanding was that the document they would sign would say that, and that would have been the day before. That they were willing to serve if evidence was found in a court of law to overturn the election.
And that was something that you found out on the 13th, not the 14th.
Correct.
Was that your understanding of the overall purpose of the meeting?
That was.
And how did you get that understanding?
That's what I was told the day before on the conference call.
By who?
By Laura Cox and Stu Sandoval.
Was it more Laura or more Stu?
I can't, it's been 3 years, I can't remember how the conversation exactly went.
You stated you left the meeting for about an hour and went up to your office.
Correct.
What prompted that?
It wasn't necessarily a meeting that I was involved in other than from a clerical administrative side, so at that point I really didn't have a need to be there, so I went upstairs to do other work.
Including the time that you were. Question about the basement. Why was the meeting held in the basement?
Probably just for space reasons. The largest conference room we had at headquarters was not necessarily a spacious area, and with that many people in the room, it was a little tight, but I don't know for certain.
Okay, it wasn't a sneaky.
Not that I know of.
For get a lot of people, that was the largest room available.
I believe so.
Have you had meetings in the past in the basement?
We have.
How long was the total meeting?
I'm not sure. It was probably around an hour, but I don't know the exact amount of time.
But how much time were you there before you left for an hour?
No more than 5 minutes, I don't think.
Were you not needed at the meeting?
No.
And why not?
Again, I don't have any real legal expertise, and I wasn't a person who was an elector, and therefore I was only there to be in a clerical role.
Was anybody taking notes of this meeting?
Not to my knowledge.
Taking of the cell phones, is that common?
Again, I can remember at least 2 other times that we collected cell phones.
You mentioned making an announcement to tell people that the party, that they could go to the Capitol if they want, but that's not what the party was asking them to do. Who requested that?
Troy Hudson had asked that I make that announcement.
And did you feel like that was necessary?
Yes, because again, my understanding was we didn't want this meeting to be misconstrued as a meeting of the electors.
And what was the general reaction by the electors in the?
I got the sense some folks still were gonna go, and some other folks had decided that they would not be going.
This photograph that was taken by Ken Thompson, do you know where that photograph is?
I don't.
Is it within your personal knowledge if there were any alternate electors from the original 16 that were present in the meeting?
But I believe that some replacements have been selected.
You know who those people were?
I do not know.
Do you know how they were selected?
I do not know.
Was there a document that was, to your knowledge, that was only signed by Kathleen Burden on that day?
Not that I recall.
No further questions. Thank you.
George Ron from Marion Henry. Now, you mentioned earlier that you reached out to Representative Cheney, Mr. Malgren, who had concerns that certain electors did not fully understand what was going on.
Correct.
Do you know Marianne Henry?
I do.
Can you recognize her sitting next to me here?
I do.
And does she fall into that category of electors who didn't necessarily know what was going on according to you?
Objection, Your Honor, this calls for legal conclusion.
Your Honor, that's not true. I'm asking specifically when he reached out to those people, whether or not she was one of those electors.
When he reached out to whom?
When he reached out to Representative Cheney and Mr. Malger, whether or not I'm not asking him about the truth of the matter asserted or anything like that. I'm asking him whether or not something he testified about earlier, if she falls into that category.
Okay, well, we allowed him to answer that question previously, for whatever purpose it would serve. He did testify that he made contact to those individuals because he felt like some people were being casted in an unfair light. And so your question is to know if your client was one of those people?
That's correct, Your Honor.
I'll allow the question.
I had not given thought to Marianne Henry specifically.
Do you have any knowledge about what she knew regarding this?
I do not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, sir. My name's George Danini. I represent Kathleen Burton. I'm gonna go out on a limb and ask that same question that my colleague just asked. When you went to January 6th committee, when you went to the reporter, and you were talking about certain electors that you thought were being cast in an inappropriate light, was Kathleen Burton in those that you thought was cast in an inappropriate light?
That is correct.
Okay, so your statement, I believe, was some of the electors were not responsible for what had happened, and that's where you put Ms. Burton.
Correct.
And you also said the second half of that was that there were other people involved who you thought were actually culpable.
Correct.
Who were those people?
I thought that Michonne Maddox might be culpable.
And then you mentioned something about come back to this later, but I just wanna do it real quick. You said that there were, you had come down at the conclusion of the meeting, right?
Correct,
At Troy Hudson's request,
correct.
because you, on behalf of the MRP, wanted to make sure that they knew that they were not being asked to go to the state capitol.
Correct,
And you said there were some people who definitely weren't gonna go.
correct.
Are you aware that Ms. Burden definitely wasn't gonna go?
I am,
Are you aware that Ms. Burden definitely did not go to the Capitol?
I am.
So you know that she went home with her terminally ill husband at the time, back home right from MRP headquarters.
I do.
Now, sir, I wanna try to figure some things out, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know. This thing is separate, it's just a signature page, so it's, okay. So I'm handing the witness Defense Exhibit B and Defense Exhibit C for identification. I've shown a copy to Ms. Logan.
Is he a proposal to it?
C is a proposed for identification. And just for the record, proposed Exhibit C is merely the signature page that has been attached to the multi-page document, which is People's Exhibit 7.
I don't think this witness is able to, knows anything about Exhibit 7.
No, I was orienting the court, not the witness.
That's not how that's done.
Okay, you should, defense exhibit C is what?
Is the signature page for,
Are you asking him what?
no,
the
I'm,
document?
that was for you, Your Honor, so I can, I'll go direct to the witness. All right. Let me ask the question directly. Defense Exhibit C for identification as proposed, is that the document you saw in the basement?
Correct.
Is that the document you saw as a one-page document alone?
I don't recall if I saw a second page, but I remember 3 copies of this page being on the table for sure.
Okay, and really trying to get granular here, but you were at the meeting at the beginning,
Yes,
you left for a while,
yes,
and then you came back down.
correct.
And the timeline is, we're talking about when you came back down, you saw 3 pieces of paper on the table,
Correct,
and people were signing it.
correct.
Did you see 6 pieces of paper on the table?
Not to my recollection.
You saw 3.
I believe so.
And Logan asked you, they were 3 separate signature pages, correct?
Correct.
Signed in triplicate, was the question.
I saw 3 of this page be signed.
And that's it.
That's all I saw.
Okay. Now, you also answered, I think, on cross-examination from somebody else, there was a document that was designed just for Kathy Burden to sign on that day. That's Defense Exhibit B. Have you ever seen Defense Exhibit B before today?
No,
Okay. When you were on the call with Laura Cox, Troy Hudson, and Stu Sandler, do you recall a conversation about a document that Stu Sandler had drafted that was going to be signed that day?
I do.
Okay, but you didn't see the document.
Well, my understanding was that's what they were reviewing upstairs in the lobby. But again, I didn't review it myself.
I see. Okay. So, all right, that's helpful. So you believe that the signature page was downstairs in the basement.
Correct,
Upstairs, you said they walked up 2 by 2
correct.
and they were signing a document,
I believe they signed it, yes.
the electors. You believe that's this Stu Sandler created document?
It was a, I'm not sure if it was this document or not.
Okay, fair. So we've heard other testimony that this Kathy Burden document, Exhibit B, may have been signed downstairs in the basement. You don't have knowledge of that?
I do not know.
Okay. And your testimony about the document that was signed on the first floor was that each of the electors present signed their own document,
I believe so.
and 2 by 2 because there wasn't enough room.
Correct,
And so at the conclusion of that upstairs event, there would have been 16 individual documents,
I believe so.
one signed by Kathy Burden,
I believe so.
and one signed by each of the other 15 electors.
I believe so.
And do you remember seeing that document?
I saw the document as we handed it out, but again, that was,
So I'm asking, I haven't seen these documents.
Yeah.
So was it a single page document or a multi-page
I
document?
believe it was 2 pages.
2 pages. Do you know anything more about that document that you can share with this court?
I don't. I know it was made for each of the individual electors because with the change in the slate, it had to be reprinted for somebody.
And when you say change in the slate, that's referring to there were two people who were originally electors who didn't show up on that day. One had COVID, the other didn't want to be part of the ceremony, so they had to be replaced.
Correct.
I see. So you remember those two documents in particular being printed because those were two new people.
Correct.
Okay. And who was controlling the action upstairs?
Troy Hudson.
Okay. All right. So you and Troy Hudson were walking people upstairs 2 by 2.
Correct.
And again, timeline purposes, when did you give this instruction that MRP is not asking people to go to the Capitol?
It was towards the end of the meeting.
Before the 2 by 2 upstairs?
After.
After. So did they all come back downstairs?
They had started up in the reception area before the meeting started downstairs. So there were folks downstairs when they arrived, but the meeting had not started. And so that's when we would go down, get the folks, bring them up to the lobby, have them sign or review the documents upstairs. Then they went back to the basement. At that point, a meeting started in the basement. I was there to see it gavelled in. I went to my office, came back towards the end of the other meeting, saw it wrap up where this was signed. The photo was taken, the announcement was made, and then most people left the building.
I said I had my timeline wrong. Okay, so the 2 by 2 happened beforehand.
Correct.
I see. Okay. But we don't know what those documents are. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. So on the call, let's go back to that. The December 13, 2020 call, Laura Cox, Stu Sandler, you, and Troy Hudson. That's the first time you learned about this meeting that was going to happen the next day, right?
That is correct.
And Troy Hudson was going to be responsible for contacting these folks to appear the next day?
I don't know who was necessarily contacting them.
Oh, that wasn't discussed on the call?
That wasn't discussed.
Okay, and was on the call, you know what, let's just do it this way. What do you remember about that call?
Again, very little. It was that we are holding this meeting tomorrow, that they'll be signing an affidavit saying that if called upon because of a court case, they are willing to serve as the electors, that we don't want this to be portrayed as the official meeting of the electors, therefore we don't want press there, we don't want it recorded, and if any camera crews are to show up from the media, to speak with them and get them to basically leave the premises.
And so just keep picking up on a couple of things you said. If called upon and if there was a court case that made a decision changing the election, I'm assuming?
Correct.
So you're talking about an event that could happen after December 14, 2020.
Correct.
What was gonna happen on December 14, 2020 was the signing of a document that was like a placeholder,
Correct.
a contingent document.
Correct.
Something that had no legal force in effect unless and until some future event happened.
Correct.
And that's your understanding.
That was my understanding.
And that was explained to you by Laura Cox
By Laura Cox and Stu Sandler.
and Stu Sandler. And again, Stu Sandler is an attorney
Correct.
for the Michigan Republican Party.
Correct.
And he analyzed this.
Correct.
And he provided you with legal counsel about this.
Correct.
And was there some, we heard this, so I just want to follow up. Was there anything discussed on your December 13th call about how this would be a symbolic or ceremonial meeting to kind of honor these folks?
No.
That wasn't discussed?
No.
And did you guys, you said you were aware of the 1960 Hawaii precedent. Was that discussed on the call with Laura Cox and Stu Sandler?
Yes.
And you said you had a basic understanding of that, right?
Correct.
Had you ever seen the contingent slate that was prepared by then the Democratic side that year?
I did not.
You've never seen this document?
No.
And again, you weren't responsible for calling these individuals to show up on December 14th, but were you aware that that was for Troy Hudson to do?
Again, I wasn't sure who was doing it. I had later heard that Stuart Foster, the deputy code director, had made some of the calls, but again, it wasn't under my purview.
And Stu Foster works with Troy Hudson,
Correct.
reports to.
Correct.
And so, again, this was a meeting of these electors on December 14, 2020, at MRP's request,
I believe so.
at Laura Cox's request.
I believe so.
And that was implemented by Troy Hudson and Stu Foster by contacting his folks to show up the next day.
I believe so.
Now, you're not sure what those people, what Stu Foster said to like a Kathy Burden or anybody else.
No, I was not involved in that
Okay,
process.
so we'll have to ask him. I think we've covered it, but just to, yeah, we covered it. Real quick on, I think just to clear up things, I think Mr. Sonberg just gave a wrong name. On the document that was signed upstairs, and I'm just gonna refer you to the exhibit, Defense Exhibit B. If you look at the second page, do you see there's a notary there? Do you know who Henrietta Toe is?
She was our chief financial officer.
Is she also a notary?
Yes.
And are you aware that she, well, let's start with that one. This may be the one that was signed upstairs, you don't know, but did you see Henrietta Toe notarize that document that Kathy Burton's on that
I
day?
can't recall.
Whether in the basement or upstairs?
I can't recall.
Okay, now you said that the meeting, these folks were there at the Michigan Republican Party's request, right?
Correct.
And they were there at Laura Cox's request.
I believe so.
Why is it that Sean Flynn's gathering in the meeting that Laura Cox called for?
Well, again, I wasn't sure what was happening in the basement. I assumed because he was a lawyer.
So you deferred to a lawyer.
Correct.
And you you said, well, excuse me, you didn't say this yet. You said, or Sean Flynn kind of arrived on the scene, if you will, in the summer of 2020?
Correct.
And he was working in that building?
Correct.
And you had some interactions with him in the lead up to the election?
That is correct.
And you actually even went to him for legal advice at times?
Correct.
Even though he's a Trump campaign person?
Correct.
And so you're not a lawyer?
No.
And you are obviously involved in politics, yes?
Correct.
And in this space, tell the court how much you rely on legal advice.
In politics, you probably rely on lawyers more than in most professions. It's a case that campaign finance law is constantly evolving. Every cycle it's different, and therefore you go to legal counsel. Sometimes, depending on what your role is in any campaign, it can be almost daily. So for example, when we send out campaign mailers, those all have to go through legal counsel before we even review them for copy a lot of times. Same thing with press releases and whatnot. It wasn't out of the ordinary for us to go to a legal counsel to make sure that we weren't going to get in trouble for something like a libel suit. So it's, legal counsel probably plays a very outsized role, more than it does in other businesses.
Okay, and so you knew Stu Foster was involved from the MRP.
Yes.
He wasn't there that day, but you knew he was involved in this process.
I had heard some after the fact.
Well, you're on the call with him on December 13th.
Stu Foster.
I'm sorry, it's Stu Sando, excuse me.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yes.
So he was involved as a lawyer.
Correct.
And then Sean Flynn was there and he's a lawyer.
Correct.
And so even if you thought something was not going exactly how you thought based on what was told to you, you figured there's lawyers here, so I'm gonna defer to the lawyers.
Correct.
You think people like Kathy Burden might have said there's lawyers involved, so they know what they're doing?
Objection, speculation.
Not, speculation.
With Joan. Now, you talked a little bit about those documents and how they had to be printed because there were 2 replacements that showed up. Did you do anything to get replacements there?
I did not.
Did you care if there were any replacements that showed up?
It wasn't up to me.
Well, but based on what you knew, how you were briefed from Laura Cox and Stu Sandler, did you have any position as to whether replacements were there or not?
I didn't. My understanding was this was what legally needed to happen, and so it was one of those things. I was there to just make sure that the process went smoothly and that camera crews weren't admitted to the building.
Are you aware whether Ms. Burden had played any role whatsoever in getting these 2 replacement electors to show up that day?
I'm not aware.
Were you downstairs when the meeting opened? Did you observe anything about how Ms. Burden and or Ms. Rodriguez were at the last minute nominated to be chair and secretary respectively?
I had seen them be nominated, but that was right around the time I left the meeting.
Okay, was that anything that had been told to you in advance?
I don't believe so.
Was that discussed on that December 13th meeting?
I don't believe so.
So was that, to your knowledge, a spur of the moment thing?
Again, I didn't really have any knowledge of it. No.
By giving her this symbolic title of chair, was she in charge of anything in that room?
I wasn't in the meeting.
Your Honor, that assumes facts not in evidence on the symbolic, nomination of chair.
That's fine. I'll strike symbolic. For the portions that you were there, was Kathy Burden in charge of the meeting in any way?
For the portions I was there, no, but I wasn't there for a majority.
I understand. But for the portions you were there,
Correct.
she was not in charge.
Correct.
So we're just looking back at Defense Exhibit C, signature page. You see a page 2 at the bottom there? Is there any page number on that document?
Not that I see.
Your Honor, I'd like to just move for the admission of Defense Exhibit C.
Any objections to it?
No, Your Honor.
Defense C is agreed.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just curious, we got some information that there were some FBI agents interviewing people at the end of November and maybe talking about these documents that were signed upstairs. Do you have any, did the FBI reach out to you?
They have not.
Do you have any knowledge of that?
No.
I've got a note here, and I have to go find it. I'm just gonna ask the question from your interview. It says that Sean Flynn directed the electors to sign a document that was up on the first floor.
That's incorrect.
Okay, so you think that was the downstairs?
Correct.
Okay. If you said that to the AG's office when you were interviewed, that it was Sean Flynn that directed the signing upstairs, that was either misreported or a misstatement?
Correct.
Okay, Are you aware, that something was eventually mailed to, whether it's the National Archives, the President of the Senate, the Chief Judge of the Western District of Michigan, or the Secretary of State? We don't know what got where, but are you aware that something got mailed on the
Yes.
day? Yes?
Yes.
Are you aware that that happened on the next day, December 15, 2020?
No, I was not aware.
How are you aware something was mailed?
Only because it was reported in the news.
Okay, did you talk to Sean Flynn about that?
Sean Flynn had mentioned he was going to be mailing that.
Okay, so Sean Flynn told you that he was going to be mailing something that was signed on that day.
My understanding was it was the documents that were signed in the basement.
He told you he was mailing those?
Yes.
Right. And so, let me ask you this. You said before that there was, to your knowledge, based on your conversations with Laura Cox, Stu Sandler, and the lead up to December 14th, 2020, there was no plan to replace the Democratic electors with the Republican electors. Did I have your testimony correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. And so, to the extent that Sean Flynn had somebody sign a document downstairs that tried to do that, would you say that he took advantage of the electors that were there that day?
Objection, Your Honor, I believe that would call for speculation.
Well, he knows this is an MRP meeting. These people, at least Ms. Burden, showed up at MRP's request, and if some Trump campaign lawyer hijacked the meeting and did something else, this witness can certainly say whether he thought that was improper.
So this witness wasn't there for most of the meeting.
He doesn't know, based on his testimony, what was said. Your question is asking this witness if he believed that the attorney took advantage. Based on what?
Based on this lawyer who got, at least from this witness's testimony, at least my client, well, all 16 defendants to sign a piece of paper and then send something in to DC that was more than that, this witness can opine on that.
I join in believing that the question is proper because I think we've all heard Mr. Zamet's testimony. He wasn't in the basement the entire time, but he was in the building. And so for the portions of the meeting that he heard, the interactions with the electors, what he's overhearing with people on the phone, his phone call the day before, he has facts and circumstances to reach that opinion. Again, it goes to weight, not necessarily admissibility, recognizing that he wasn't in the basement the entire time, and so far, again, we haven't had a witness who is. But he does get us as close as possible to indicate what was being said to the electors and what was being said in the building.
Right, I don't know if that gives him the position to give a response as to whether or not he believes that the attorney took advantage of these electors based off what testimony he's provided us.
I think,
He's already been allowed to express his opinion as to the culpability or non-culpability of the variety of the electors, and that would directly imply or infer that he formed an opinion based upon his discussions with them. Since that door has been opened and he's been allowed to express that opinion, this would simply be an adjunct to that. I don't see how you could permit one and deny the other.
Well, Your Honor, I don't believe that this door was opened by the people, which is how that door would be opened. Defense counsel doesn't need to open the door for other defense counsel, and it's still, the fact still remains that this witness was not there for the majority of the meeting. Therefore, he is in no position to say whether or not an attorney took advantage of anyone who was a part of that meeting.
I'm gonna allow it only for the purpose that he was present for a portion or portions and also in the building testified to hearing conversations. So based on whatever knowledge he has, he can give, I guess, whatever answer he can give based on that. I also tend to agree with the argument made by Mr. Silverthorne, which is it's in line with information that we've already let in, that I have already let in based on his statement that he made calls thinking that there were, electors that were being, improperly cast, lights improperly cast on them. So I'm gonna allow him to answer the question. You can repeat the question, because I'm sure he doesn't remember.
I'm sure I don't remember. The good news is this is gonna be my last question.
It was
but-
that he believed that Flynn took advantage.
Yes, fair. So let's bracket it to be fair for both sides here. So you were down in the meeting at the beginning, you were down at the meeting at the end, you were there for some of the 2x2 going up the stairs, you had observations during the day, okay, that's kind of the baseline.
The witness has to say yes or no.
That's the background, that's the baseline,
Correct.
correct?
I think so.
Based on your knowledge of what that meeting was supposed to be, okay? You're good still?
Is that yes?
Yes.
To the extent that Sean Flynn got something signed in the basement that was other than what was requested by MRP, a contingent document, he took advantage of those electors that day, in your opinion.
In my opinion, yes.
Thank you, no further questions.
Just to follow up a little bit on that, Mr. Zaman, my name is Paul Stamplin, I am representing Amy Fascinello. Okay, do you know Amy?
I do not.
Okay. In regard to those individuals that were taken advantage of that day, would she be in that group?
I don't know her well enough to know.
Okay. In the, you said that Sean Flynn was the one that gavelled in this meeting.
Correct.
Okay. So, I'm assuming, let's just, so everybody understands, gavelled in means you're leading the meeting, right?
Correct.
And this Sean Flynn is somebody that you relied on before for legal opinions, correct?
Correct.
And you would consider then relying on his legal opinion, and when you asked him anyway, it was reasonable for you to rely on his opinion, right?
That is correct.
Okay. I think you said before, you knew that he was that he went to Georgetown, right?
That is correct.
And he was a lawyer licensed in Michigan?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And was he the lawyer for the Trump campaign in Michigan?
Yes.
Okay. Were there other lawyers that represented the campaign that you knew of?
Not on a day-to-day basis, it's only
Okay. All right. Were there other lawyers that day with Mr. Flynn?
I saw another gentleman who was another lawyer. There may have been more, again, in the conference room. I did not see anyone else, but I heard conversations going on, but that could have been over a speakerphone.
Okay. And when you say conference room, are you talking about the meeting in the basement or the meeting on the first floor?
There's, behind the reception area, there is a conference room.
Okay.
And
That's
so
the
again.
smaller one, right?
It's smaller than what's in the basement, but again, it would be on the way to most of the building. Not the basement, but if I was going to my office or whatnot, I was constantly passing by the conference room.
Okay, so where were the other lawyers you saw? Downstairs?
There was one other lawyer, I do not know his name, but he was upstairs. He had been in the lobby at one point, and another one I had seen going to the conference room.
Okay, we're talking about the conference room that you had to walk by the
Correct.
reception area. Okay. Sean Flynn and any of the others have access to printers while they're there? I mean, does Sean?
Sean worked in the building, so I would assume he had access to a printer.
Okay. And so, and understand this also, you were, or your direction from Laura Cox was that no one else was going to be allowed in the building that day other than the electors.
That is correct.
Okay. And no one was going to be allowed to take pictures or to film what happened.
That is correct.
And you and Troy Hudson collected all the cell phones so that nobody could record them.
That is correct.
And that was all part of Laura Cox's direction to you.
That is correct.
Okay. your estimate about how long you were absent from this meeting in the basement was about an hour, I think you said?
Approximately, again, I can't recall, it was 3
Could have been
years ago.
shorter than that?
Could have been.
Okay. If somebody else had said it was 20 or 30 minutes, would you disagree with that?
Again, it was 3 years ago.
Yeah, I get it. Okay. I don't have anything further, Phil.
Did everybody pass their follow-up questions? Mr. Singleton already?
Bar closes in 16 minutes. Question everybody wants to hear. Who else were you thinking wasn't as culpable as some of the others?
Well, again, I didn't know everyone's name that was there, but I didn't think Kathy Bergen was necessarily culpable. I didn't think Mayra Rodriguez was necessarily culpable. I would say the vast majority, I didn't think was culpable. I thought that they were going along with what lawyers were telling them.
You think that they were doing what?
Going along with what the lawyers were telling them.
And was this opinion formed on the upstairs meeting that you'd had, because it's 2-on-2?
It was just kind of a general assumption. It was formed throughout watching the proceedings of the day.
Okay. You indicated that you saw 3 pieces of paper or documents on the table, is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm looking at 2 documents in front of you. The one that would be to, all right, so it'd be to your left, looks like one document.
Signature page?
Yes, and the one that's on your, my right, your left, put it back down. I can see a split where clearly there's another page under it. Right. Let's reflect that he's opened the page. You don't recall seeing any documents that had a split that would indicate that there was another page under it, do you?
This may have been the document that was upstairs. Again, that was a multi-page document, but I cannot attest to that.
You don't know what the downstairs document was, do you?
The downstairs document, I can tell you, was this page.
Okay.
The signature
Okay.
page.
What
And you-
exhibit, just for the record, the exhibit you just put up in the air, what's the number on that?
Exhibit C.
That would be, defense C, and the other one that has the split would be,
Defense B.
Yes, and for the record, I'm only selecting those documents as a representative example of being able to tell when you're looking at pages on a table, that there may be additional pages under them.
There could have been.
Okay, but you didn't see anything, did you?
I didn't see anything. All I saw was this, that I recall.
And that's all you saw? And so you didn't see like pages slightly askew where they weren't lined up completely?
Not to my recollection.
You just saw, what from your view, were 3 single pieces of paper?
To my recollection.
Okay. In the table, you had plenty of time to view the table?
It was a passing glimpse, just watching
Okay.
people sign.
The instructions to the group that the GOP was not necessarily asking them to go to the Capitol, was that done individually with the people upstairs?
It was an announcement.
It was an announcement at the group, is that
Correct.
correct? And where were you standing when you made the announcement?
I was standing inside the doorway, so close to where that round table would
Okay.
be.
And to the best of your knowledge, was everyone paying attention to you?
Again, I thought folks were, but I can't attest that 16 people were all paying attention.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that you noted a lot of what I have here, which is gray hair?
That is possible.
Okay, do you notice that the defendants sitting here have a lot of gray hair?
I do.
Okay, so you really don't know who heard you or didn't hear you?
That is true.
Thank you.
redirect.
Yes, please. Mr. Zaman, you mentioned that you can recall 2 other times that cell phones were collected at the Michigan GOP headquarters? What were those, when were those times?
We had a committee meeting that was a meeting of the issues committee. I believe we collected cell phones that time, and then I remember a state committee meeting where we had to collect cell phones at one point.
And on December 14th, 2020, you collect the cell phones kind of to control the narrative, the media narrative?
Well, my understanding was we were collecting them because we didn't want this portrayed as an official meeting of the electors, and therefore we didn't want it filmed and recorded and sent out to the public.
Because the official electors were in the Capitol building in the Senate chamber.
That is correct.
Now, the document that was being signed upstairs that you were bringing electors up to what happened to those signed documents?
I'm not sure.
And did you actually look at any of those documents?
I did not.
Are you sure they were documents and not ballots?
Again, I didn't look at it close enough. All I know it was multi-page.
Now, the document that's, Defense Exhibit B, I think that's to your right. Did you see that document on December 14th, 2020?
Not to my recollection.
But the document that, was referenced on the December 13th, 2020 call was stated that the electors would be willing to serve if called upon, is that correct?
That was what I was told.
It did not contain language that said, that identified the, Republican candidates as duly elected electors, correct?
My understanding was they were only to serve if a court case determined that they would be allowed to serve.
And as far as the meeting that took place in the basement, would you agree you missed a good portion of that meeting?
I missed the vast majority of it.
So you saw the start
Yep,
and essentially the ending?
correct.
Now, is it fair to say that whatever happened during that hour that you were in your office, you don't know what happened?
Objection leading.
Do you know what happened the hour? Yeah. Do you know what happened the hour you were in your office?
I do not.
Do you know who was leading the meeting the hour you were in your office?
I do not.
Do you know who all spoke up or objected or did not object that
I-
hour you were in your office?
I do not.
Do you know who proposed signing the document that included the signature page of Defense C while you were in your office?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object. That is misrepresenting this witness's testimony. This witness's testimony is that only that single page was signed in the basement. So when she refers to a multi-page document, that's not this witness's testimony, it's an improper question.
I'm not referring to his
Sure you
testimony at all.
She said, do you know?
What's the question?
Does he know who proposed the document that included that signature?
That's my objection. That included is a misstatement of the record. That's the piece of paper. That's it. So it didn't include anything.
That's your exhibit.
Well, it's in the record. And that was produced by itself by the Attorney General's office in discovery.
Your question specifically, does he know,
I'll rephrase the question to
well, I
just
was
make it easier.
questions I could address the, are you withdrawing questions?
I'm withdrawing it and
Okay,
I'll
question.
rephrase it. Do you know the circumstances that led to the production of that page, Defense C?
I do not.
Do you know if it came with other pages?
I do not.
So, can you say that Sean Flynn is the one who presented that document?
I cannot.
Can you say who presented that document?
I cannot.
When you came downstairs and you observed electors signing it, did you observe any electors objecting to signing it?
I did not.
So, can you say that electors did not want to sign it?
And just for the record, the "it" is the Defense Exhibit C?
It is.
That's correct.
Okay.
I cannot.
Now, you were asked to take note that several of the electors have gray hair. Do you remember that question?
I do.
Can you take note that the defendants are adults?
I can.
Can you take note that the defendants are allowed to make choices?
I can.
Now, are you in a position, having missed an hour of the meeting, to say that any elector in that basement signed against their own will?
I am not.
can you say whether or it was or was not their choice to sign document, defense C?
I cannot.
As it related to the replacement electors, do you know the circumstances of how they were, I guess, called upon?
I do not.
Do you know who called the replacement electors?
I do not.
Do you remember speaking with Special Agent Shock about the electors being, someone searching for electors?
I do.
Do you remember who that person was?
I believe it was Michonne Maddox.
And where did that take place?
She was in the lobby area and on the main floor. Again, we had taken cell phones from folks that were down in the conference room, but we allowed people to continue to use their cell phones if they were on the main floor of the building.
And did alternate electors actually appear at the GOP headquarters?
I believe so.
How many?
I believe two.
Were their names on the list?
Again, I was told that certain people would be let in, but they weren't on the initial list. There wasn't really a list per se.
So who determined that the two alternates who are not on the list would be let in?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I just need to object. I think words matter here. So these are all alternate electors. I think she means replacement electors for that day. I think that's an important distinction.
Well, on the cross, one of the councils did refer to them as alternate electors. It wasn't clarified then either.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, I'm sorry.
I'm clear as to what we're talking about.
Thank you. So who determined that the alternate replacement electors would be allowed into the, GOP headquarters?
I believe it was Troy Hudson.
Were you present, when when, I guess, an announcement was made about going to the Capitol building?
I was not.
Do you know who made that announcement?
I believe.
No,
well,
not do you believe, do you know?
Michonne Maddox.
How do you know that if you were not present?
I had heard from.
Okay, I'm gonna stop that too,
Okay.
that's hearsay. Okay, so you were not present.
I was not.
What about the photograph? There were not supposed to be photographs, correct?
Correct.
Who, decided that who requested a photograph?
Michonne Maddox.
Was Ms. Maddox an attorney?
She is not.
But the photo was taken, correct?
Correct.
Some electors did go to the Capitol, correct?
Correct.
And alternate replacements were allowed into the building even though it was closed, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, into
Thank
the
you.
building is the MRP headquarters?
MRP headquarters.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Okay, there is a sequestration order, so we're going to excuse you, but you need to understand that you're not to discuss any portions of your testimony with any other witness, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, you're excused. And, I was, we have another witness, or today be, or this is a good time to adjourn.
No.
I can call another witness, he's not gonna be short though.
Okay, well then we don't have time, because I have to give everybody a break now anyways, we've been sitting for 2 hours. So by the time we got back, it would be at least 3:45. And.
See the vote?
We're not taking a vote. Only my vote counts. So let's align our calendar, because we need, how many more witnesses is there, 6 or 7? Is any of the defense expecting to call witnesses? Should I set some time aside for that?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, let's just Wednesdays normally work good to get everybody together.
Your Honor, what is the court's thinking on like multiple days? 'Cause I don't know we're gonna get this done in a bit.
No, I just asked her to
Oh.
set aside 2 more days.
2 more days, okay.
I assume there's 4 more, 5 more cases?
There are at least 5 rolling.
At least 5. Do we need to set 3 days? We can set 3 days when we see.
Let's do that. And your honor said something about maybe finishing this up before you started the next batch?
That's not gonna happen,
Okay.
I don't believe, because the next batch is supposed to start when,
The 30th.
of January. It's not likely that that's going to happen, but.
For the day of, yeah.
I vaguely believe that there are members of this group that could not do February 13th that week, is that correct?
My problem, for whatever reason, is I'm not able to get my phone to connect or even on the internet here to
Slow your calendar.
Yes, so both Mr. Krause and I are just watching things spin around and spin around.
Anybody else like working on that?
I
don't know.
did you go to your browser? Because I think there's something you have to accept and acknowledge and then
I
hit
was
okay.
doing it all, set that down.
You might toggle your Wi-Fi out.
John, I do have one, administrative.
I know.
Was the court looking at February 13th?
We can do February 13th, 14th, February 21st, 22nd, or the 27th, 28th.
We could do February 13th and 14th.
We're gonna do 3 days, not 3.
It's extremely difficult to find a third day in the same week, because I have other cases that.
I can do 13,
13th and 14th, fine, Your Honor.
That works for Ms. Burton. Yeah.
February 13th and 14th works for us, Your Honor, for, excuse me, Michelle Longo.
So it looks like that works very well. Well, there's that.
I've never seen it taken.
Neither am I. These are the lucky dates, and, yeah, and then set a third date as needed, then we'll know better if any defense counsel needs to call, any witnesses as well.
Some suggestions, should we put down now the 20th or 21st, just as that third optional day? Because when we get there, that's not gonna be available to you.
Pretty well available on the 21st?
I'm not, I'm actually on vacation.
Oh.
So,
So that doesn't work, maybe that would be part 2 for the second round. Well, no, because you're in trial, so that won't work with the new business.
Okay, I'll just try.
Are we doing 8:30 again on the 13th and 14th?
We're gonna do 13th and 14th,
8:30?
8:30 in the morning. There was an administrative matter.
Yes, Your Honor. So there are pretrial conditions that the court imposed, travel. And we're on the holidays, my client, Ms. Burton, lives in Tennessee, so she's gotta come back and forth for the proceedings, which obviously she's gonna come and do. She's been here for the 2 days, she'll be here the 13th and 14th. What I'd really ask is, I mean, I can get more specific, but I'd ask the travel restrictions be just withdrawn, removed from his burden. She's got 10 grandkids, a bunch of kids. She travels, and it's just an administrative nightmare to, number one, just get all that figured out, and then to have to check in all the time about a trip. I just asked if it was, international travel is fine, but domestic travel.
I'm gonna remove the travel, I have another motion for tomorrow, same thing. I'm gonna remove the travel restrictions. I don't, now I'm knowing a little bit more about the case, believe that it's necessary. So the travel restrictions.
Thank you.
Applies to everyone. Thanks.
We don't have to ask for
Thank you.
to go see your grant.
Thank you, Your Honor. Like, this is presented in order, or will that be?
Freeze you up like if your hand goes
We
like.
have to review all their PhD.
We could also present a stipulated order if that would be preferable, whatever the court prefers.
We still have to do a PA 53 form over, so it's easier for us to take care of that.
Okay, great, thank you.